Hello, and welcome to Hip Hop is Higher Education. Please like and subscribe on all your social media and podcast formats. We are your hosts. I'm Stephanie Reed of Aspire to Higher.
And I am Summer Willow, creator of the Ladies Love Hip Hop platform. And we're happy to be here today. Steph, what's goody?
So, we are in for some real conversation today. So I want everybody, all our listeners, to strap in, buckle your seatbelts. Class is in session.
Ding, 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 ding. That was my school bell.
So Summer and I have been talking, as we do, about hip hop. And lately our conversations have centered on the evolution of hip hop. And more specifically, the ways that hip hop has strayed from its origins. We often wonder, musically and culturally, is hip hop still the voice of the people? And as self-ascribed true school hip hop fans, we wanted to talk this thing through. What we're really doing felt like an anthropological dig in the hip hop craze, comparing today's hip hop with modern hip hop for the sociocultural and political elements that are part of the hip hop culture. We want to know, does hip hop still have that same connection to its historical development? Hip hop, of course, is still a force, but now it's such a part of the American pop culture that there are shows like Hip Hop Uncovered, documenting hip hop's historical connection to the streets. That show also left us questioning whether hip hop still has some of those codes of the street that it did before. So what are the sociocultural, political, underground street drivers of hip hop today? Summer and I are joined in this conversation today by a real live social anthropologist, hip hop cultural educator, and scholar, Mr. Will Strickland. Give Will Strickland a hand, folks.
Yes. Welcome. So for all of our listeners out there, we want to welcome our guest. Our esteemed guest, Will Strickland, created and taught the world's first university-accredited course on hip-hop culture at the University of Massachusetts Amherst in '98, and this class was called Edutainment, the Impact of Hip-Hop on American Culture. I mean, how deep. Will has been a creative content creation developer, leader, co-host, and executive producer of several media contents for major North American networks like VH1, NBA TV Canada, The Score, the list goes on. He's currently the director of Full Court 21 Canada, the world's most unique summer basketball tournament. His resume is longer than my arm. We would probably need a whole entire new segment just to read it, but just know that this man's passion for music is highlighted by the work he's done in aiding to guide the careers of some of your favorites and mine, like Wu-Tang. Okay, I know you all love Wu-Tang. We're talking Jay-Z, Public Enemy, Tupac, Drake, KRS-One, the list goes on and on. So ladies and gentlemen, it is time to dig into the mind of Mr. Will Strickland. Thank you for being here.
I want to thank you, ladies, for allowing your brains to go on zero and allowing me to be on the show with you.
Whatever.
Because I'm just saying, like, wow, no. I appreciate you having me for sure, and I'm looking forward to the conversation, the discourse, without question.
Absolutely. This is going to be a rich conversation, but we want to start at the beginning, right? So we always take the journalism approach when we're conducting our podcast, and we don't take for granted that this is going to be the first time that some folks have ever heard of the illustrious Will Strickland. So please explain for our listeners, our audience members, your background as an OG in hip hop and as a hip hop scholar.
Well, I think that I'm the product of a misspent youth. I have been fortunate enough to have worked very, very hard to have a quality education, to learn how to create and exchange cultural currency through hip hop culture. As a person who wants to rap, dance, and like I've done everything in the culture, and then realized that maybe my purpose in the culture was to help drive it forward in a different way that wasn't singing, dancing, rapping, whatever the case might be, whether it be being a music executive at some of the top companies in the world, starting my own company in my university dorm room, whether it be, teaching the world's first university accredited course, being the first American to run a Canadian organization for urban music. Nobody says urban anymore. But it's called the Urban Music Association of Canada. I was the first American president there and did some things, which like jump-started my relationship with this kid named Aubrey Drake Graham. You might have heard of him once or twice. And I don't want to sit on here and do all that, but like I said, I've been blessed and fortunate to have utilized the tools in my toolbox, my daddy tools, as I call them. Not to dismiss my mother in the least. It sounds better when I talk about. If you guys have ever seen the TV show Boardwalk Empire, Chalky White, Michael K. Williams, who plays Omar from The Wire, he has a scene about his daddy tools, and that's what I talk about my father, like the things he gave me to build, right? And a good craftsman never blames his tools. So no matter what happens in this life, I know that I can build in every arena, and that I have the discipline and the desire to be able to learn and turn suggestion and activation, no matter what I'm doing, whether it be playing professional basketball or working in the music industry or teaching. I feel like those are disciplines I have a vested interest. And so I do my best to listen, because listening makes the best learning. And listening is a skill. A lot of people don't believe it. They don't know the difference between listening and hearing. I do. I practice that. And I also have this affliction that not a lot of people can catch. To be honest, I'm going to full disclosure. I suffer from a disease called actual facts syndrome. And
I love it.
Not many, like I said, not many can deal with that part of it. But that's what I work with each and every day from the sun up to sundown. So that's how we'll move forward.
Okay, and just to actual facts syndrome, love it.
I love it.
Just to balance out that great explanation and kind of culmination of who you are. There's also, and those are, in my perspective, a lot of your learnings and how your philosophy moves. But just to speak about you as an OG in hip hop, Young is in Charge, DJ, managing groups. Tell the folks a little bit about, you've touched so many different levels and aspects of the hip hop culture and been a very integral part of people's careers. So let's just talk about, maybe in a snapshot of how you came into this game and what really set you on fire with hip hop.
Oh, the difference between the culture and the industry is what you're asking me about. Because the culture had nothing to do with a dollar. I could be standing in front of the mirror with my mother's hairbrush, and that could be my Madison Square Garden. Uh-huh. That could be my Wells Fargo Arena. That could be my, O2 Arena, wherever it is. And that's 30,000 people watching me in the bathroom rapping. I could go to karate practice and learning capoeira when I was playing ball in Brazil, and kids are in front of the dojo or whatever they called it, and they're doing capoeira moves that look like b-boy moves and breakdance, and they put that together with the percussive music of Brazil, right? Afro-Cuban, Afro-beat, everything, right? Or, when I draw graffiti on the wall, I'm not thinking about getting a deal. These things have nothing, I'm not thinking about the music I'm making and having it shrink wrapped in a old gel case and putting it on a shelf somewhere, or doing a video on top of, with a half naked woman on top of $400,000, car. That's the industry.
Right.
But the culture is something that lives in you in a way, like, to quote the great and illustrious Lawrence Christian Parker, rap is something you do, hip hop is something you live. I live that part of it. So the industry part because I lived it, it was easier for me to understand the difference between the industry and the culture, and go into the industry saying, okay, how can I enhance the industry with the cultural currency that I've developed and earned through being in the culture before I got into the industry. And I think I don't knock people who get into it just to make money. I don't. That is your choice. And I have a keen understanding of personal pronoun use. What you choose to do might not be what I choose to do, and vice versa. I don't necessarily have to agree with it, but being able to start my, the first thing, one of the first things I did was a concert for EPMD. I was 16 years old. I couldn't get into the club that I had them booked into, right? Because I'm like, if I can't sound like KRS-One, Rakim, and Chuck D when I'm rapping, if I can't have the charisma and the wittiness of a Grand Poobah Maxwell, if I can't do all that, I don't want to do this. But how can I be involved? And figuring out that I had this little radio show when I was, 16, I would leave at lunch. And I think this is part of the decision between the culture and the industry. When I got an opportunity to get, and this is a long story about the guy who had the show before me. It was the beginning of mix shows. Mix shows were not a common thing in the 80s. And I'm older than a lot of people will probably be listening to this. But they weren't common things. They were just really starting. And I was just in this little town in Texas at the time, because my father, blessed dead, was in the military. Mm-hmm. And I went down south to finish up my high school, my last year, and like a little bit of high school down in Texas. So, I saw Jerry Curl. I wasn't a Jerry Curl dude. But whatever the case might be, I'm down there, and the guy who was doing the show, I was chasing him around because he was like the Funk Master Flex of that little town.
Gotcha.
I knew I was a better DJ than he was, but this is where you have to humble yourself. You can't create something from the outside in. You have to get inside. And once I'm inside, then I know how it works and I can move accordingly. Right. So I went up to him one day at a party, at a function. He did a youth party, and said, "Hey man, can I work for you?" He goes, "Well, I can't pay you." I said, "I'll carry your crates, I'll set up your casket, whatever you need done. You tell me what you need to do." Mm-hmm. Right? So he thought he had a gopher. No. He thought he had a dummy. I'm like, no, I'm cool. Right. You don't realize what you just gave me by allowing me into the circle, because who I'm about to know. Now, I'm not saying that like I'm snaking him or something. I'm just saying I know now who the people are.
Right.
So if my opportunity presents itself, I've already created some sort of connective tissue between myself and those people.
Right.
You have to remember, I'm 16 years old, and I'm thinking like this, because I'm not thinking short term. I'm not thinking about, let me make some money right now. I'm thinking about, how can I create a career? Do a thing I love.
Right.
So in that, the guy gets busted trying to sell weed at a kiddie party out of town, whatever. Oh. And next thing you knew, all these people who knew him and were hiring him for get jobs were like, we need someone to do. Oh, who's that kid? Oh, remember him? Yeah, he didn't go.
Right.
And I became the youngest in charge midday. I had the mix show.
Right.
So I would, and it happened at lunchtime. So I had to make a decision. Do I want to sacrifice my lunch and go do this show? Or
yes,
do I understand that sacrifice is not a word I use? Anything you do to enhance your life is not sacrifice, it's an attribute. It's an attribute. So I was adding to my life. So I could always have lunch. I'd go there, do that show.
Right.
And then come back to my 5th period English class and barely could walk through the door because I knew all my friends heard me at lunch.
Listen, you speaking our language. You are
speaking
our language.
It was a spark. So from EPMD to the first artist I ever brought down to school when I was in university was De La Soul. And I'm like, I can make money bringing artists here to do shows all the time. Because when I did the EPMD show, normally they'll just, as a young promoter, they try to gas you and steal stuff from you. Like, oh, let me give you a hat or something. You bring the artist. Nah. I said, let me get the door.
Right.
So they were charging because they know I had the mix show, so I could bring people in. So let me get the door, which is like $10. It's normally $5, so $10 you have a concert. Let me get the door, and I knew they were going to skim off the door, and 20% of the bar. Like,
Wow.
what? No, we're not doing that. I'm like,
Yeah,
okay,
come on,
cool.
man.
We can take it to another club. This is me at 16.
At 16.
So
Oh my God.
I said, we can take it to another club. And no, cool, okay. Because what people don't understand is that just like when you go to the movie theater, that's not the movie business, that's the concessions business.
Absolutely.
That's why cold popcorn from Sam's Club and some sugary water costs as much as your ticket, if not more.
Right.
When you go to the club is not the music business or the club business, it's the alcohol. You get to the club because watered down drinks cost so much.
You're telling too many secrets. You were really giving
No, but you know what though? I love giving these secrets because if you can't execute the way I execute, it doesn't matter whether you know my plans.
Absolutely.
Speak on it.
Yes.
Will, listen.
So in that, you can have all that.
Let me ask you this, because you just gave us a million gems and we barely brushed the first question, right?
I'm sorry.
No.
You got me started.
You effective. This is dope. Talk to us. You mentioned connective tissue. You mentioned starting this at 16, but let's talk a little bit about all of that insight that you gained from 16 until now. I'm not a person that believes that the hip hop culture is not still a driver for the way you function and know how you do business. So what part of that, in that connective tissue that you just mentioned, right, between the people that you met, the access that you gained, what were the political, sociocultural, like, what were the drivers of the hip hop culture that really was a force for your hustle, right? And do you think that that was what brought hip hop into its time that it's in right now?
Wow, that's a heavy question, because I think that, again, having the education I had, understanding like the intellectual curve that I had, aka street knowledge that I had before I got into that, and being able to apply that, and then also understanding my obligation and also my limitations put on me as a young Black man, as a Black person in America. I had to say again, okay, how do I utilize my daddy's tools to recognize those things, but not allow them to affect how I get down, right? And I think that's really key. That's how the thing moved forward. Because if everybody said, okay, well, only Black kids like this stuff, but if you think about it, the first big song in 1979 that came out was Rapper's Delight. And Michael Wright said at the beginning of that song, "Now I am Wonder Mike, and I'd like to say hello to the black, the white, the red, the brown, the purple and yellow." So somebody's been telling you a lie. So I deal with perception and reality all the time. And because I had that foundation early on, everything we do in this thing from a socio-cultural standpoint, whether it be political, like we understand the politics of the day. That wasn't a faux pas. Of the day, and how everything is designed to keep you as a second-class citizen. But I cannot wallow in the notion of that. I have to utilize that as fuel to drive me to do other things. So I'm not worried about proving something to someone else. I'm proving something. My competition is me. And my fears and my quirks, my idiosyncrasies, they can get at you. Then pixies on your shoulder all the time, telling you, "I don't know if you could do this," or "Dog, just do that shit. Just do it." I'm sorry.
It's good.
Say the bad
You're
word.
great.
Okay.
It's a great word.
Okay. So having to be able to deal with that and understanding the balance between what you learn in the streets and what you get at home, those things, you can know the difference. I'm like, okay, how can I utilize this? Because we all rub up against a certain element in our communities. And people try to make it seem like those communities are so bad, but it's just your community, that same element exists, only they wear three-piece suits and they went to Yale and Harvard. And they don't actually squeeze the trigger, but they have the people that they can hire to do that. So it's different, but it's the same.
And you know what?
And once you come to that understanding, like you talk about the socio-cultural part of it, like once you get that understanding and you say, okay, well, how can I take this thing, because I'm creating culture,
right,
and turn that into commerce
Mm-hmm.
without compromising the culture.
Right.
Well,
that's what I started to learn how to do.
You raise a point that I was discussing last night when we were talking about trauma and how, trauma has been a driver in our communities in terms of our stories and how we tell our stories. And, I was talking about, I was talking to Raph Almighty of Third Platoon, and I was talking to him about, the kind of the two sides of trauma. And there is the exposure to reality, right? Because that thing that happened maybe at an age where you shouldn't have been experiencing that. You shouldn't have been seeing that. It did expose you to something that was really happening. And for that, you have this nugget of truth. So you are then connected to reality, right? And then the other side of trauma is pain. And the pain of trauma is the thing that, of course, it brings us together. I mean, we all can connect to the pain of it. But I feel like there was, in the front end, at least, there was a mix of types of hip hop that people were creating. But I think that at the front end, the story was about the pain of the trauma, and the story was about the story was about the reality of the trauma. Don't push me because I'm close to the edge, like really painting the picture of, what the drug epidemic was doing to our communities, and really painting the picture of how, violence against women, creates this type of person, or, Latifah standing up and say, who you calling a bitch? Like that, the trauma of that. Let me tell you the reality of what I really am. Right. So that reality piece was amazing for us. And I think we consumed that, I think apart from the industry, we consumed that reality. But then the pain part, the pain is where I think the sociocultural and the political forces that were against us, that pain kind of overrode the reality. And it created these rappers that told these stories, but never connected, or not never, let me not use that word, seldom as time went on, connected to the reality of the thing and how we get out of the thing and fight the power and how we move past the thing. And it was just pain. And so
I'm sorry, I don't disagree with you in the least. And I think that's a great point between the difference of the trauma versus, the pain of it, because we all suffer from generational PTSD. Okay. But the difference is, case in point, during the crack epidemic, we built more prisons. During the opioid epidemic, we found empathy and thought it was a mental health issue. It's always been a mental health issue. It's just who cares about the people suffering the most from that trauma. Yeah. And if, like, when kids see shootings in our schools, they're supposed to just shake it off and go home because that's what you're used to. When these white kids do it, and it happens in these predominantly white schools, or whatever the case, suburban schools, they get grief counseling and all this other stuff. They get exposure on television about how they were traumatized, and they get reality, whatever the case might be. So America's always turned pain into profit. We are living, breathing examples of that. We are descendants of that pain, of that profit on the pain. So I think understanding the difference in those things, and that's part of the reason why we're educators, is that sometimes the education won't come in the music. And when it does come in the music, they try to mute it. So for every Chuck D, for every knowledge reigns supreme over nearly everyone.
Yes.
For every one of poor righteous teachers, for every brand Nubian, depending upon like how you feel about 5% understanding and supreme mathematics and things of that nature. The fact of the matter is that they were taking what they learned and trying to educate as well as entertain. That's part of the reason why I named my class after KRS-One's album 1990, Edutainment, because great, entertain me. I want to make music. This is my vocation. This is what I want to do. But at the same time, I'm going to educate you. I have a platform and an opportunity to tell you some things about what I see. So the first time I heard about AIDS was on a KRS-One song. Nuclear destruction, AIDS, this doesn't scare me. I didn't have the internet back in the age.
That's right.
I had to go look it up.
Encyclopedia Britannica didn't need to have it.
Word is born. Microfiche.
Microfiche, yes.
Okay.
Not the microfiche. Listen, I used to love spending time on the microfiche. Don't
Word
sleep.
is born. Word is
Don't
born.
sleep.
But all I'm saying is that you have to be willing to receive it, though. And then it got to the point where people were like, oh man, I don't want to hear all that preaching. I'm making money, because money became our gods, because we thought it was a way to get out of the community. And again, selling drugs, same idea. I mean, I don't know shit about that math, son, but I can pitch these rocks.
Yeah.
Right. What you're saying is what I think has been the basis of Summer and I bringing our platforms together. It's the bringing people away from just the consuming of hip hop, right? We all agree, I think, here on hip hop initially being trauma informed. What we want to figure out now is, do we still see that in hip hop, right? I think it's still trauma informed, because there's new traumas every day. There's new racism, right? New forms of it. So when we talk about the sociocultural factors, that's more of us just, I think, reminiscing on how we saw hip hop come to be. But now we trying to figure out what are those drivers for these mainstream current day hip hop folks. There's rappers, and then there's still industry folks who are pumping out a narrative that doesn't really belong to us. Are we still buying into the same narrative that hip hop is still pain? Because I also see a lot of triumph in hip hop. Right, we left trauma informed and became revenue driven. So there's so much happening, I think, in current day or modern forms of hip hop. I'm curious what your thoughts are, Will, on what do you see today driving MCs, rappers, producers, and people like you and I, educators who use this to engage with young folks.
I think it's different now because the portfolio has been diversified. I think that the avenues to access the industry is different now. There were barriers to get into the industry in the 80s and 90s. Now you can go online and call yourself a SoundCloud rapper and say you're in the industry. So the barriers to entry are different.
Yes.
And there is a desire everyone wants to be Jay-Z, but they don't really know the story of Jay-Z. They think I can sell some drugs, tell some stories, kind of sound like him, or sound like Drake, or sound like Quavo, or sound whatever, and I'll be a star. But people don't realize, you know how long it took Jay-Z to become Jay-Z?
Yeah.
He put out his first single in 1986. He was with Jazzo in 88, going on tour with Big Daddy Kane 88, 89. His album doesn't come out for another 8 years. Okay? So Jay-Z, by the time 1996 rolls around, Jay-Z's 28 years old. 27, 28 years old. This is a young man's game, apparently. But Jay-Z wasn't even Jay-Z after Reasonable Doubt. Until Hard Knock Life, until about 2003.
Right.
Did Jay-Z actually become Jay-Z? So you have to realize, Jay-Z is born in 1969. He's 34 years old before he becomes Jay-Z.
Jay-Z.
So the path he took, and not everybody's going to take that same path, because paths get cut off, as the late great Christopher George Latour Wallace and Tupac Amaru Shakur, like bless the dead to both of them, but they never saw the potential fulfilled in a way that, like, guys were trying to get out and do other things. Tupac was acting more than he was rapping.
Yeah.
They want to do, like, again, and when guys started to figure out they can diversify their portfolios, Jay-Z buys a part of a basketball team. Nelly does that, Usher, like, all these guys understand we have a certain place and we can utilize our power. Diddy with the Rock the Boat. So again, understanding your platform and saying, okay, here's my power. What do I value? And how can I create consensus around what I value outside of just the music? The music is the hook. It's the hook.
It's the hook,
right?
Yeah.
But the rest of this stuff is the lyrics.
Ooh.
Listen,
So
you say it. That's you preaching. I tell in the work that I do with my students, I call it the broccoli versus cake, because I'm also a mom, right? So I put it in that frame, like, I'm gonna give you some broccoli because you need it. You need these nutrients. I'm gonna give you this knowledge. Every now and then I'm gonna give you some cake because listen, we want everybody who don't want cake. So it's the broccoli and the cake.
I like that metaphor, and I actually use one that's a little bit different when I'm talking about them writing their papers in accord to, or I guess kind of as a parallel to what you were saying about food and making it something that was something we all do. So it is a common thread. I say, when you guys write your papers, or before I got the papers, I'm like, okay, name a food you didn't like as a kid, Stephanie. What was the food that your parents fed you didn't like as a kid?
Man, beets.
I was about to say beets.
So okay, both of you are on beets. Okay, cool. Beets. So they would put them on your plate and you would eat just enough of them to make it seem like you ate something, and then you do, what would you do with the rest of them? See? I don't have to say it. You already know what it is. Just spread it around. So I tell them, don't give me a paper that's supposed to be 2 or 3 pages long, but you have like one sentence and then a whole big piece of white space on the paper, and then like, don't do the spread around.
Right.
And they get it. So I don't have to explain to them because it's a common thread. And I think that's the key in being able to create an understanding of what we're trying to do educationally and culturally, socioculturally, sociogeographically, socioeconomically, in a way that you have to speak a language, not to dumb people down, but like, everybody eats food. I mean, that's how I got my class in the first place, is that,
right.
I was speaking on when Harvard used to have their hip hop conference. I spoke on a panel about hip hop and education. I guess it was me as the advocate for the culture, and then there's a gentleman from Yale or Brown or something. You know, he's a black guy, and you know, he had the tweed jacket with the suede patches on the elbow, pipe in his pocket, nose in the air. You know, he was one of those. And,
one of those academics.
Right. And his whole tact was to challenge everything I was saying, and then think that I was going to revert to some sort of street situation where I smack him in his blabberbox, and then you say, see, look at what they do. I'm like, hey, you look just like me, dog. What are you saying? But instead of beating him with these, I beat him with this. So much so, the guy left the stage in tears, mad because he couldn't crack me. And some people from the University of Massachusetts came up to me and they said, would you, sir, like to teach a course on hip hop culture, this thing you've been talking about?
Right.
My chest got all swollen. I want to teach a course on hip hop culture. And they said, okay, when you come up with the curriculum, give us a call. I'm like, whoa, hold up, whoa. I thought you guys didn't want me to teach it. You already had it. I was just going to teach it. But here's the challenge, and this is where you talked about the connective tissues, socioeconomic part, sociocultural part, is that now I have an opportunity to control the narrative. But if I haven't planned my work so I can work my plan, I fail. And I am personally allergic to failure, as well as penicillin, sharks, and felonious stupidity. I'm dead serious. You've never seen a shark attack in your life.
You seem like you're also allergic to alternative facts.
Yeah, we don't get down like that, right? But you've never seen a shark attack before. What happened to those people was trespassing. The shark did what it was supposed to do. You were in the water.
You're in his house.
So now let's develop our house. Let's develop our house. So I get all that together and I start figuring out how I'm going to teach this. How I'm going to take all this stuff I learned in the street, all this stuff I learned in school, going to one of the top universities in the United States. I went to Rice University, the Harvard of the South, go Owls. And I triple majored in managerial studies, political science, and economics. I got my master's, my MBA in entertainment law, and I started my doctoral degree when I created and taught the world's first university accredited course on hip hop culture at UMass. But how it came to be was because these people asked me and I didn't know what I was going to do.
Right.
And this is where, and this is no disrespect. And when anytime you say this is no disrespect to anybody else, it ends up being disrespect.
It's a little disrespect.
Whatever. You know what? I'm gonna fall on that. I'm gonna fall on that sword. I'm good with that.
Yeah.
We as Black people have an innate ability through the trauma we suffered to turn nothing into something.
Absolutely.
There's no way chitlins become a delicacy. I don't eat, but we turn nothing into something.
Every day.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so in that, I'm like, I have nothing. I don't have Shakespeare. I don't have algebra. I don't have any precedent before me to do the thing I told these people I'm going to do.
What you had was that cultural currency, though, and they saw that. They saw that what you were doing on that panel, that other dude wasn't doing, was actually dropping gems about cultural and sharing cultural currency. So I wasn't there.
No, I mean, 100%, 100%. But I had to figure out, like, how do you teach a course in hip hop culture? I know I can talk to you about the music and the culture, because I'm an advocate of knowing the difference. Like, again, the rap music industry, or the culture or the business of hip hop is rap, DJ, turntablism,
right,
breakdancing.
Right.
B-boying is the culture. Breakdancing. When Alfonso Ribeiro can put How to Breakdance on K-Tel Records.
Oh my gosh, that was so great.
That is industry. That's industry. But the dance and everything else, the essence of that thing, that's the culture.
Mm-hmm.
So I've always said, like, there's a difference to me between rap. When people say there's hip hop music, there's music of hip hop culture called rap. Yeah.
Well, rap music.
But there's no and we allow the misnomer to happen because people who didn't know or know anything about our culture started to help to condition the idea that if someone got shot at a concert, hip hop did it.
Right. Huh?
So that's how the conflation happens, right? But no, when somebody gets killed at a rock concert, it's a lone shooter.
Yes.
It had nothing to do with rock and roll.
If something happened in these political protests, it's Antifa, it's Black Lives Matter, but you know.
Look, well, when you storm the Capitol on 1/6, it's not white terrorism, it's protest.
Yeah.
Disgruntled Americans, citizens, patriots.
Right. Patriots, it's right. You know what? I like to call it a transferable ill. Like transferable skills is a transferable ill. It's like you use this to your advantage. Right. It's like your advantage is to brighten up the subject. And when it comes to Black and brown folks, you use the deepest, it's all about the language. Use the darkest language. Use the most incriminating vocabulary to explain the thing that you do, sir.
Right.
Amen.
You want to, again, controlling and crafting the narrative to fit what you want it to fit, and then continuing to perpetuate that thing, it becomes boilerplate.
Yeah.
So Michael Vick could have saved President Joe Biden. He could have saved the whales. He could have recultivated Africa. But remember, he let those people kill them dogs in his house. They'll always tell that story no matter what he does, right? And that's part of the conversation. I guess that happens with us because that's how the story must go.
Absolutely.
So I'm figuring out how to teach this class, and I said, okay, I start reading all these books, and I'm like, wait a minute, I'm working hard, but I'm not working smart. I don't have Jefferson, Washington, Lincoln. I don't have a dead history. I got Hurt, Bambaataa, Flash, KRS-One, Queen Latifah, Russell Simmons.
Right.
People I can contact, people I know who are living here.
Bring them in.
They're not book editors who have no vested interest in my culture.
Right.
So I'm going to get the people who actually made the history and say, I told the school, I'm going to do this. And they go, whoa, pump the brakes on, boy. This is still, a university, an institution of higher learning. You have to utilize some text.
Yeah.
And so I said, I got three in particular. The first one was, at the time, the Bible on hip hop education and pedagogy by Trisha Rhodes called Black Noise. Then there was another book by William Eric Perkins called Dropping Science. His son took and failed my class, and I had to correct some of the stuff in his daddy's book. That's a whole nother conversation. And then the last book, which I found the most interesting that I use, along with like I had a field trip to 88hiphop.com where I did the first ever online concert of Black music history. Yes. I like being first at everything except being last.
That's called experiential learning. That's right. What you
did. So this was back in 1998. You know, the internet was maybe 3.5, 4 years old. We take it for granted now, but it was a different thing back then. Dial-up, AOL. Oh, you have mail. And this last book was called Black Culture Industry by Ellis Cashmore. In the book, it begs two very specific questions about what we do. The first question is there such thing as Black culture? To which you ladies would answer.
For sure.
Yes, no doubt. But the most important question to ask is, do Black people own it?
There you go. And that's why I said no. And that's why I said no in the background on mute.
Wow.
Mm-hmm. There is a Black culture, but it's not our culture.
Right. And I think that's the disconnect you guys are talking about. You're trying to find out, like, how do we redefine that thing? Because now it's industry, and it's, you know, the captains of industry drive the business of hip hop. And then by virtue of seeing financial gain in the culture, it then becomes hip hop to a lot of people, which it's just the industry of the culture, right? It's not the culture in and of itself. So you can tell the people who trust the culture, you know, Kendrick Lamar trusts the culture. You know, I'm gonna talk about somebody from North Carolina, Rhapsody, trust the culture.
Oh, yes.
Okay.
Shouts and love to Rhapsody.
The artist formerly known as Timothy El Padero Thedford, trust the culture. That would be Jay Electronica.
Oh, yeah, I did not know that one.
Oh, listen. I'm locally respected and nationally known for utilizing people's whole governments.
We love it.
I'm talking about sports or hip hop culture, because
education.
Again, it's about knowing the people. I know their names, but when Jay Electronica says the name on the birth certificate, that's not the real me. When you can come out and create your own attribute, when you can define yourself as opposed to allowing someone else to define you, whether we're talking about hip hop culture,
right,
or what you do, Stephanie, with your symposium, right, or what you guys are doing with this podcast,
right,
you control the narrative. The way you want to present yourself is, if I want to call myself King Born Alak Justice, I can, because that's my name.
Right.
I gave myself those attributes.
Right.
But again, understanding how you can control your narrative and then turning that into industry without compromising your integrity to do so is part of why we do what we're doing. It's part of the reason why I educate. I'm like, okay, well, you know, and to go back to the UMass story, because I think it's really important. And I'm sorry, I'm talking so much. But it's something you guys said that impacted me right now to tell you this story, because those are the books we read. I didn't know how to create a course outline, a syllabus. I'd gone to school for years. I didn't know how to create one.
Yeah.
Right. So when I figured that out, I go in front of the school and I have to present what I'm going to teach at the University of Massachusetts. And you know how you go to the court and there's a jury of your peers? Well, none of my peers were in that room.
I'm not surprised.
There's five like 65-year-old plus white Anglo-Saxon Protestant males who knew nothing about my culture, who were going to tell me about what I was going to do. And so I present myself and I tell them this story of, you know, the same thing I've been telling you guys. I'm like, okay, I got the course outline, and a week before my review, I'm sweating bullets because I don't know how I'm going to present. I don't know how to tell these guys what I need to tell them. I don't know how to make that connective tissue we talked about, Stephanie.
Right.
Because they don't know what I know.
Right.
So I have to figure out a way to deliver those nutrients you talked about, those beats you talked about. And so I figured that out. I'm taking a shower, almost break my leg jumping out of the shower, taking a bar soap. And right now, I kid you, this is a real story. I almost broke my leg jumping out of the shower, trying to write down this idea because I was thinking about the Karate Kid, and I hadn't seen the Karate Kid in years. Now, I'm not talking about the one, of course, back in the day, the one with Jackie Chan and Jaden Smith wasn't out. So it's the original one, right? So
original Miyagi.
Right. So you remember the story, right? So Ralph Macchio, or Daniel, is the new boy, and he's at the new boy at the school, and all the girls like the new boy because he's a new boy, but all the boys don't like the new boy because the girls like the new boy. Follow me? They jump him. While he's getting jumped, the janitors, or I guess director of custodial affairs, the era we live in, I want to get canceled for calling him a janitor.
Right.
So he comes out. He saved the kid, and the kid's holding speed knots. He's like, I want to learn how to do that. He says, all right, come to my house. I'll show you how to do it. But all he has him doing is painting the fence, sanding the floor, waxing his car. Remember? Wax on.
Wax off.
Where's mom? So finally, one day the kid says, okay, Mr. Miyagi, when I'm done here today, I'm going to leave and I'm not coming back. He goes, why? He goes, I'm tired of being your slave. He goes, no, I thought I was supposed to learn karate. He goes, okay. If you're going to leave today, fine. But show me what you've learned. He goes, what I learned? He says, okay, so show me paint the fence. The kid is frustrated. He's a kid. He's not thinking. His mind is not in the right place. So he started flailing his arm. Mr. Miyagi said, no, show me the way I showed you. He does it right. Mr. Miyagi throws a punch. He blocks that punch, but doesn't click in his mind what just happened. So then he says, okay, show me sand the floor. Mr. Miyagi kicks. Son blocks the kick with his hands, and that's when it clicks in his mind that the work he was doing was merely the vehicle by which he would learn his discipline, which was karate. Well, if I can teach these people who don't know anything about my culture, that's the same way. If I can tell them about my culture without talking about my culture, I win. And I used the story of the Karate Kid. I told them that same story. And one of these guys stood up, pulled up his pants, and said,
Love that.
That's the greatest shit I've ever heard in my life. This is exactly how he said it. What made you come in here to tell us about this class with this hippity hop stuff and you're the Karate Kid? I said, sir, well, again, we've all seen the movie, Connective Tissue.
Exactly.
It's common language.
Exactly.
So I never have to say hip hop culture when I'm telling you the story of how I'm going to teach the class.
Right.
And the guy turns to me and goes, get his contract. I signed my contract that day.
Let's go.
Because I planned my work.
Let's
go. I can work my plan. I figured out how to speak to people who did not understand me or my culture. Right. So that is a gift that I've been blessed with. And to be able to take our language, our images, our expressions, our cultural expression, and say, this has value. This has importance. This is as important as apple pie and the American flag.
Americana, absolutely.
And if you understand this, and that there are only certain kinds of people who can do this thing, then you'll have me at that school. You'll have me speaking at this thing. You'll have me doing this. Because I could go to school with someone and our majors could be German history. And it might be a German that's doing it. And we have the same aptitude, same grades and everything, but that person's going to get the job, and he should get the job. You know why? Because there are things anecdotally that he can bring to the proceedings that I can never give. That make the connective tissue in that expression so much greater. I can give you all the information in the world. Mad people know, they can read the book and go, I know about hip hop culture. But do you really know?
You really, really know.
That's
absolutely.
The authenticity.
Yes. Well, you have dropped so many gems, and I think we could talk about this forever, amongst other things. But you walk into our final question of the evening, kind of with that sentiment. And, this podcast is called Hip Hop is Higher Education because of the things that you mentioned. We believe that this is a tool that we can use not only to inform itself, from the inside through the lived experiences, but also to inform the world as it relates to our story and our socio-economic, political, cultural experiences, not just where it started, but where we're headed. And in many ways, we will be the voice of the future. We are the voice of the future. So when someone like Stephanie and I says hip hop is higher education, and just to close us out, what does that mean to you?
That you can elevate as a result of accepting that there is more than one way to think. There's more than one way to feel. There's more than one way to apply knowledge in this world. And it's not just necessarily reading, writing, arithmetic that you grew up with, that there are things that you can learn and turn into, you know, like I said, the intellectual curve turns into a degree at this university and another degree at this university, and then the opportunity to teach a course at this university, and then to have that be the currency you take around the world, and people pay you to tell a story that I just told for free on here. That if you don't value it, no one else will. If you don't value your soil, if you don't respect your soil, no one else will. They will always disrespect your soil. So
got it.
Tomorrow is, I'm more excited about what I'm doing tomorrow than what I've already done. Those things are great. Don't get me wrong. I respect and admire them. Those are the pillars and the people who came before me, who provided the opportunity for me to do that. I'm on the shoulders and the backs of those people. But these things that I've developed as a result are the pillars on which I stand, so that other people can see the edifice that I've created through that and say, okay, how do I do mine? And I'm like, here's the blueprint. But you have to build in your own way. As long as you have a foundation, everything we do in this life, I believe in this wholeheartedly. 3 very basic steps: setup, execution, follow through. Where most people fail is the follow through.
Yes.
So say, for instance, whether you're meeting a guy, a girl, building a home, making a sandwich, whatever it is. The setup is, Summer, our eyes meet across a crowded room. Right? So we make the contact. The execution is I walk over, hey, Summer, what's going on? My name is Will, how are you? We talk, right? And then, you know, we hang out a little bit. Hey, look, can we get out of here? I can take you to get something to eat. We can have, you know, a hot cup of steam, a long straw, big bowl of nothing. You can have too. You know, she finds me witty. We're cool. We start hanging out. She becomes my woman. I become her man. But then we start to get together and she's like, it's a beautiful spring day today. Well, let's go out for a walk. I'm like, baby, I want to watch the NCAA tournament. Right? Okay. Go ahead. I'll do it next week. And then next week comes, it's still on. She leaves again. The next week, NBA playoffs about to start, baby. And the next time she walks out, she leaves and doesn't come back. Why? Because all the things I did to get her, I didn't do to keep her. And again, you can apply this to anything you do. So there's a reason why, for all that we're doing right now, that's great. Tomorrow, it's going to matter more.
Yes. Amen. Thank you, Will.
Thank you guys for having me.
You taught the whole class in this podcast, and we are so appreciative.
I'm sorry I didn't talk more about the artists and stuff. It's just like,
oh, you don't need to.
That stuff was cool. That stuff was great. You know, working with Big, bless the dead. And I tell some stories. I share some stories about the first time on promo with Big in Houston, and a situation in the bathroom with the young lady and some jerk chicken. It's a whole nother conversation. We can do that some other time. That's not the educational part.
Yeah, that's not the after hours podcast.
Stuff with Wu-Tang and that Ray and Ghost, having them on tour, and they were the ones I did the first ever online concert with. It was Ghostface, Killer, Capadonna, and Raekwon. Awesome. That we did in February 18th, 1997.
Summer and I believe that this is not going to be the only episode that we have you on. There's just way too much knowledge. There's so many ways that we could have dived deeper. Is that a word? Dove deeper?
Right? You got it. You do a deep dive. You got it.
Diving.
So much more to get into. So we are appreciative of you, your knowledge, all your gems. And thank you so much for being here with us. Talking about hip hop is higher education.
Amen.
So keep it hip hop, folks.
Keep it hip hop, people. We'll see you later. Peace.
Peace.